So we do want to welcome you to this Loving Our Immigrant Neighbors workshop. So this is a part of the Interfaith Sanctuary Alliance of Santa Barbara has an annual Love Your Neighbor Week in which we work with faith communities throughout the region to try and promote this idea of loving our immigrant neighbors because across a lot of our different faith traditions, if not all of them, there's a common theme of welcoming immigrants and caring for them and just loving our neighbors in general. Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara has somewhere between 20-25% immigrant population. And so this is a big chunk of our neighbors, literally here in Santa Barbara. And so we just wanted to take some time tonight to talk through, I guess, what engagement can look like within a church setting and just how we can be equipped to be good neighbors. Diane, do you want to say anything else about this?
No, we'll just kind of get into, if you'll go to the next slide. So we're kind of going to just do a small little piece on a little Immigration 101 to help people kind of understand the different statuses there are in immigration. We're going to talk about some common myths that are out there. We're going to talk about scripture and kind of a biblical viewpoint of immigration. And then Landon's going to kind of engage us in ways that people can get involved. And I just want to say, Joyce and CPC, just so happy. I also met with a family of 4 yesterday that were looking at getting involved from CPC. And so just really thankful for the way you financially and physically support us. It's great. And then we want to maybe open it up to you guys with what time we have left and see what questions the information draws out of you, or what questions, just any questions that you might have about immigration and the work we do. And Landon and I are going to kind of take turns here. So I'll start us out. And so I just wanted to clarify some terms for us on who is an immigrant. So really an immigrant is any person from a different country who wants to come and live into the United States permanently. But there's sometimes some issues with that on how they can do that. And so when we look at what a non-immigrant is, then a non-immigrant is somebody who comes from a different country, and many times they call them foreign nationals, and who are admitted to the United States, but temporarily. And it's usually for a specific purpose. And so most of the time when we think about non-immigrants, I think the 2 most common non-immigrant visas that are approved are visitor visas, tourist visas, and student visas. And so they're only supposed to be, tourists are only supposed to be here for about 6 months at a time. And then the students for the duration of the status of their schooling. And then we get into, I like to call people that come here without any papers undocumented. So who are the undocumented? And so it really refers to anybody who has come into the country without legal paperwork. They weren't normally not admitted through Custom and Border Patrol to come into the United States. However, undocumented can actually also apply to people that have come into the United States, but their visas have expired and they choose to overstay those visas. So we have that. We have a lot of student overstay as well. They've come here and they've decided they don't want to go back to their country, so they stay. Okay. Right, you want to go to the next screen? Okay, so I wanted to give you some demographics, and we'll take this all the way down to Santa Barbara County. But so if you're looking at this, you're going to see that the lawful immigrants that are in the United States are about 70%, 77%, yeah. So 36.2 million, but that includes people that have naturalized, people that have become US citizens, people that are lawful permanent residents, and then the temporary lawful residents, which we talked about, the tourists, the students. But recently, and we've heard a lot more about temporary protective status, people from Venezuela. We have Afghan refugees right now that are coming in. They don't really come in as refugee status. A lot of them are just coming in with temporary status right now. And today they just approved Ukrainians for temporary protective status. So we will see an increase in the temporary lawful residents. Unfortunately, right now, the way they're authorizing them as temporary protective status, it does not give them a pathway to apply for permanent residency unless they happen to have a family member here who could apply for them. And so this is what we look like in the US. So when we break that down, the figures range to say anywhere from 10.5 million to 11 million of unauthorized immigrants in the United States, meaning that they either came in with no status or their status has expired. So when we break that down to California, it's actually 11. It says that we have, sorry, let me look at that. Yeah, this is the US, I'm sorry. So California wise, we have like 2.9 to 2.3 million people in California that are unauthorized immigrants. It says that California has about a quarter of all the unauthorized immigrants in the United States. And when we look at Santa Barbara County, though Santa Barbara County has currently a population of about 448,000 people. 39,000 people, around 39,000 are undocumented. Now, when we're looking at the census or the other information that's out there, we know that there's a variance out there, a percentage that's probably not accurate, and we feel like it might be undercounted. But supposedly about 8.7% of Santa Barbara County is undocumented immigrants. And when we look at that, 23,000 are in the workforce, and about 12,000 of those are in our farm workers workforce. And this is information that has been put together by CAUSE using some different statistics that are out there. Okay, so these are the most common ways to immigrate. So a family visa petition is when an eligible family member applies and sponsors someone to come into the United States. There are only certain family members that are able to petition for other family members. So those are spouses, parents, children, and brothers and sisters. Family visas actually make up about 70% of the legal permanent residency or green cards that people that are approved into the United States. There's also employment visas. So employment visas range from a different kind of more of a, most employment visas come through higher skilled paying jobs. So people have to have, are supposed to have a special skill or ability that they can't find with workers in the United States or in education. And then they can come over on an employment visa. Some employment visas are temporary, but many of them after so many years lead to legal permanent residency as well. Then we also have, and actually for a long time, there was the whole category of employment visas for agricultural workers or for those types of jobs that they couldn't get people to fill. And then over the last 20 years, those have just been eliminated. There's still categories out there for them, but they don't fill those kinds of positions anymore. Then we have victims of abuse or crime. So there's three types of visa that falls under this. There's Violence Against Women Act, which can be women or men who are abused. To qualify for that, you have to have been abused by your US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse or parent. So the person doing the abuse has to be a citizen or a legal permanent resident for you to qualify for that visa. However, there's also what's called U visas, which are crime victim visas. So sometimes people that are victims of domestic violence can qualify under that. With a U visa, you have to be willing to testify against the person that has committed the crimes in court, or you have to at least help the police in the prosecute or in working towards getting that person prosecuted. Then there's refugee or asylees. And so there are differences between those. Asylums, we've heard of all these people that are coming to the borders right now and wanting to be let in. So those are asylum seekers. And so that means that they have to have experienced some kind of persecution or fear, and they're fleeing from that, and it's not safe for them to go home. So they come to the border and usually request that they be let in because of that. We know that that's still controversial right now and is not working so well. And many of them are just having to remain in Mexico at this point. Refugees, though, are people that have actually been from a country where the country has been determined through either a natural disaster, war, some kind of situation that's happened that that country, I'm sorry, has been determined to not be safe, and the refugees actually flee to another country, and they get approved to come into the United States. So when refugees come into the United States, they come in legally, they're admitted legally into the United States, and they can apply for work permits and they can start working. To where an asylee is now, right now, even if they pass their credible fear interview and they say, yes, you possibly have a case, they have up to 1 year to apply. And then right now with the rules, it takes a whole nother year from the time of application to get a work permit. So that first year or so, they are not here with a legal work permit. And then the lottery visa. And so there are 50,000 visas that are opened to countries that do not have very many people that apply to come to the United States. And so people can actually apply, put in an application and apply for this lottery visa, and they get millions of applications a year, and each year they will pick 50,000 people to come to the United States, and they get to come over and apply for legal permanent residency with that lottery visa. Okay, next slide.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on to the common myths about immigration, but before we do that, so part of the reason we want to share some of these myths is to be able to equip you as what I would call immigrant allies, to be able to have informed conversations with people, especially in your church setting, but really just in general about these issues. Recognize these are often hard conversations. We're not giving you these facts so that you can be right, because that often is not helpful in these conversations, as we all probably know by now. I heard a really helpful framework for engaging conversation with people with different beliefs or values, political views than you, where the speaker was saying that if somebody shares something, for example, maybe someone espouses one of these myths about immigrants, or maybe a negative opinion, the person was suggesting that rather than trying to immediately engage the conversation and change their mind, his first step is to say, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's not how I see it. And then when the other person asks like, oh, what do you mean? Then you don't engage right then. You say, oh, I don't want to get into it right now, but I'd love to talk with you more about it later. And what I like about this is that it provides a very non-confrontational way to just say, oh, interesting, that's different, but also it invites them into a relationship in a way that you don't have to have the conversation right then when you might both be heated. You can re-enter the conversation when you both know that you're entering into a trickier conversation. So just some thoughts, but at the end of the day, we want to approach everyone that we talk to about this with love and understanding. But I do want to talk through just some of the conversations that you may hear come up. So number one being immigrants don't pay taxes. And so this is obviously a myth. By and large, the evidence shows that about 50% of our undocumented immigrant households are actually currently filing income taxes using their individual tax ID numbers, which is like a substitute for a social security number. And for those that don't, many of them actually still pay income taxes just taken out of their paychecks. So because of that, there's about 90 to 140 billion in tax revenues coming in from our immigrant population every year. The myth that immigrants come to the US to get on welfare. So this is an interesting one because by and large, we have someone entering. By and large, we have evidence that immigrant populations, which includes those who are legal permanent residents, includes those who are naturalized citizens, but also the undocumented population, they utilize public benefits like food stamps, Medicaid, et cetera. They utilize them less than the native-born population. And not only that, but when they do utilize these services, they tend to utilize less dollar amounts in each of them. And so it's a tricky thing to think through, but we know that the motivations for many of our immigrant neighbors to come here isn't so much the services as it is to either find work, find a sustainable way to support their family at home, and also to be reunited with family that might be here. So this is a big one. Immigrants take jobs and opportunities away from Americans. And welcome, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So this one we've heard a lot, especially we continue to hear in election cycle years. But this is really based on a concept that isn't true. The idea that there's a fixed number of jobs in any economy in the world. And this is not the case. When you have people moving into a country, or you have a population growing in a country, that means there's going to be a higher demand for products and services in that country, which means there's going to be a higher demand for labor in that country to produce those products and services. And so as we think about immigrants coming into this country, in many ways, they are actively creating jobs within our economy as they're coming in. And not only that, but as is pointed out in the third bullet point here, there's tax revenue. There's a huge chunk of tax revenue that's coming into the US because of the immigrant population. And so removing them from the equation, especially when they're not taking a large percentage of that in public benefits, would have a big hit on our economy. And I'll pass this to Diane.
Yeah, so I'm going to cover this one, and it's we often hear the question, why don't immigrants just apply and enter the US the right way? So what I have up here is a visa bulletin, and this is showing you, these are actually, it's a waiting list. It's showing you, for example, F4 is brothers and sisters. So it's showing you what application right now date that USCIS is working on applications. So Mexico and Philippines are actually the two largest countries. More people apply from those countries than any other countries. And so if I looked at F4, F4 stands for a brother and sister of a US citizen. And so you can see that they're working on application from April 22nd, 1999. So right now, if somebody was to put in an application for their brothers and sisters, a brother or sister, it would be almost a 23-year waiting list for them to apply. And so we actually have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have applied to come in, but you can see F2A is spouses and children of permanent residents, and that's the only list that are current. So even though we kind of went over the list of people that could apply for other people, which is always, I said parents, spouse, children, and brothers and sisters, if you're a legal permanent resident, to apply for them, they go on a waiting list. And if you're a US citizen, if your child is over 21 and is married, or if it's a brother and sister of a US citizen, they all go on a waiting list. And what happens is there's only so many visas available each year for these groups. And many more applications come in than what are available. So it's been building up for years. All right, so now we wanted to talk a little bit about the Bible and some scriptures, and even the biblical tension in serving our immigrant neighbors. You can see we have kind of a balance scale here. But first I want to talk a little bit about this side over here, and you can see that there's many scriptures that the Lord or that the Bible gives us about why we should serve the immigrant, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that we're to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so when we look at that, but often the thing we hear is Romans 13:1 about following the authority and rule that's on there. And I do think that that's part of the conversation. And I do think we do need to have that conversation. But I also just want you to know that when we look at that one scripture that is often quoted for why we don't, and look at all the scriptures that there are, that this also has to be part of the conversation, is why we should serve them. And there's some really good examples there, including the Good Samaritan, on serving and loving your neighbor. And so what I think is that we do need to acknowledge that people that come into the United States undocumented are overstay their visas, are undocumented, and they are breaking the law. But when I think about this, I think about we have no problem serving felons in prison who break the law, and in much more evil, harsh ways than our immigrant neighbors do. And we have no problem going in to prisons and serving and wanting the prisoner to know about Jesus and his love. And so I just think that that's just kind of a good balance, just to say we love them. We may not agree with what they do, but we're still here to love and serve them, and not judge them. There's one judge, and so we get the opportunity to serve them, and there's many different ways that people can serve them. And so Landon, I'm going to turn it over to Landon, and he's going to kind of go over some different ways that we could do that.
So we've been trying to think through ways for different churches and different communities to be able to engage directly with their immigrant neighbors and to be able to serve them in the community. There's a whole lot of ways to educate your church community too that aren't even on this list, but we wanted to think through what are some of the more direct ways to really love our immigrant neighbors here in Santa Barbara. And so there's different frameworks that different churches are going to approach this from. Some churches are going to be wanting to just do the indirect piece. Maybe they don't want to talk about the concept of immigration at all from the pulpit. And in that instance, there's kind of these backdoor ways to be able to engage the immigrant population with your church community that sort of starts that conversation. Other churches, they might want to be directly involved and say, yes, we do want to work with our immigrant neighbors and we want to name it as such, but maybe we don't want to get involved with the more politicized aspects of it, so to speak. And then there may be some churches that are saying, yeah, we want to get political. We want to be involved at a local, regional, state, national level in these issues. And then also just thinking through different churches, like for example, Christ Pres, we know that you all have a whole church involvement. This is one of your focus areas as a church community. For other churches, it may be an individual ministry. It may just be a handful of friends doing it together, or maybe it's an informal connection where it's just you wanting to connect with individuals, or maybe you and one friend wanting to figure out how you can support the immigrant community and maybe start engaging your church community. And so I'd love for you to all think through sort of, even knowing where your own church is at, but also thinking through you as an individual, where you might want to land on this. But I'm just going to list a couple of the ways that we have here. For indirect involvement, we do encourage churches that maybe don't want to talk about immigration to be looking for nonprofits that they can support that serve the immigrant community as well as others. The food bank being one, many of our local after-school programs. We also encourage many churches as they're able to develop a relationship with a Spanish-speaking church. This is a great way to love our neighbors, regardless of their immigration status, and will often lead to some of those hard conversations. At a smaller level, we do encourage participating in after-school programs, food pantry, volunteering. We have lists of those kind of resources that we'll share out as well of different agencies you can connect with. For churches that do want to support at a whole church level, we would encourage this concept of a Good Samaritan fund, having flexible funds available for individuals that are outside of your church. I'd also love to hear from you all from Christ Pres or from other faith communities that are on this call to just hear what it is exactly that your church is doing. We also, through Immigrant Hope, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities for individual ministries through the English classes, civics classes, and tutoring. Diane, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we have classes going 4 days a week, sometimes multiple classes. So we have opportunities in English and in Spanish for many of them, but we're always looking for individual tutors as well, because many of the students that are studying for naturalization need help with their English as well. So we have a whole tutoring night where anybody that shows up, we want to have a tutor there for them to help them learn English and to help them be able to answer the civics questions.
There's another volunteer opportunity for smaller groups through Drivers Listos. So that's a little volunteer group out of Trinity Episcopal Church, and they largely support members of the immigrant community who need rides, and largely to their legal service appointments. So it could be that someone has an ICE appointment and they need a ride down to LA. It could be that they are in town and they just need a ride to the local immigration service center. It also could be, in some instances, we've had families in which maybe one of the partners was picked up by ICE or has been deported, and so the remaining family members need some temporary assistance during that time, getting from place to place, figuring out their next steps, etc. And so that's what Drivers Listos is for. And as I said, we'll share out contact information for all of this at the end. A very great way to get involved as an individual is through the Accredited Representative Program. And so this is because immigrant law is separate from criminal law in the US, you are able to work as a legal professional without actually being a lawyer. You have to pass a Department of Justice accreditation program. But in doing so, then you're able to work on limited immigration cases. I don't know, Diane, do you want to speak to that anymore?
Just to say that we are actually looking for a position right now. And so would love to talk to anybody that is interested, or can get the job description out to somebody that might want to send it out to somebody. We are looking for somebody bilingual. So I know that limits us a little bit, but would love to send that out to you guys.
The last thing is talking about some of these more politicized hot button ways to get involved. Your church could open an immigration center. Immigrant Hope is a national organization that they support churches in offering these kinds of ministries, but there's other avenues to go opening an accredited center similar to Immigrant Hope as well. For a smaller ministry, the 805 Immigrant Coalition is a group in the 805 region that is working on different state and local policies, platforms to be able to support our immigrant communities, things that provide resourcing like food, healthcare, et cetera, throughout the region. Also, there's an Immigrant Day of Action, which is sort of a lobbying day for the state of California. This year, it's on April 28th. And so that will be, I believe, a hybrid of in-person and Zoom, but it's a way to meet with our state legislators and talk to them about some of the issues impacting the local immigrant communities and different bills that are in the works to try and push those. There's also a campaign right now for a justice fund. This is just starting right now to try and get our Santa Barbara County to allocate funds to be available for members of the immigrant community who need legal supportive services. And so this is going to be an advocacy campaign that's starting up. And so that is another way to get involved. So as I said, we'll share this. I would love to just hear at the end of this too, if you have things from your own church communities or experiences that you would suggest adding to this, because we want to keep building this out. And then we do want to share just some upcoming events and ways to get involved. As I mentioned, this workshop is a part of the Love Your Neighbor Week. There's a lot of faith communities locally that are offering kind of a Love Your Neighbor service this weekend. Maybe they'll be offering a prayer around the supporting our immigrant neighbors, or a song, or a scripture reading. But then next week on Thursday, we'll have a webinar with folks like Diane, representatives from the Immigrant Legal Defense Center, the Importa, another agency that serves the immigrant population, as well as some updates about ways to get involved at the state and local level, and kind of what is the lay of the land for immigrants in our region. And then on Sunday, the 13th, we'll have a virtual interfaith vigil that we'd love for any of you all to join us. And Diane, do you want to share about this border?
Yeah, so Immigrant Hope is now doing border encounters. And so want to open this up to anybody that would be interested in going. The actual border encounter, we go to El Paso and then go across the border to Ciudad Juarez. It is May 16th through 18th, but it actually starts at 9 o'clock on May 16th. So you would most likely need to go into El Paso at least the day before. The border encounter, it's around $500, but that includes your lodging and your stay, or your lodging and your lunch and dinner. Breakfast is on your own, but they put you up in these apartments, and they do have some breakfast foods there for you as well. So you would be responsible though for your own flights or travel there. The border encounter includes meeting with Custom and Border Patrol. Going across the border, we go to 1 to 2 shelters, just depending on what's going on there. And get to meet some of the people there, and then they talk about their experiences or what brought them to Mexico. We go to the border wall. We meet with a couple of other organizations that have ministries to the immigrants that are coming over both sides of it. And then they have an option of going over in El Paso. If you guys would remember, a couple of years ago was when that big Walmart shooting happened, and they have a memorial up there. And so there's a time of reflection as we go there and talk about what happened there and the devastation that it caused there. So yeah, if anybody would like to go, I have a write-up on it, and so I can provide that. And we just need to know about April 18th. We need to know if anybody wants to join us.
And then the last thing we'll offer before the question and responses, just a few ways to stay informed at a local and national level. We have a newsletter through the Interfaith Sanctuary Alliance of Santa Barbara that tries to connect immigrant allies, especially in faith communities, with the different issues at a state and local level and ways to advocate and get involved. Sojourners, which is a progressive Christian organization, has what they call Immigration Mondays. It's the last Monday of the month at 7 p.m. in which they offer a Zoom prayer and just learning session. It's a great way, especially as different issues come up within our legislation at a national level. It's a great way to hear how different Christian communities are standing in support of their immigrant neighbors. And then highly recommend the Evangelical Immigration Table as well. Just go to their website and check them out. They've got resources on different ways to just increase your proximity to your immigrant neighbors, different ways to try and engage those hard conversations with people with different political views than you. And then they do have a great newsletter that they send out as well with resources. And then our contact information down below too for any of the things we've presented. I will email out, as I said, just some of these, well, I will email out the slides, but also just some action items, including a listing of all the different volunteer opportunities through Immigrant Hope and other local agencies. But for now, we just want to open it up for conversation, see if there's any questions or thoughts, and yeah, before we end the night.
For tutoring kids, I know that we partnered with Padres Creando Sueños for some years, and some people here did the tutoring.
Yes.
You know, Elizabeth was a tutor. Is there an organization that is organizing families and matching them with people?
I'd be curious actually to hear, Diane, what you're doing now. I've been connecting people just directly to schools that serve larger immigrant populations. Like Ocean Hills has a great partnership at this point with Franklin School doing this kind of work, for example. And so I'd be happy to talk with you all about other schools in town that would have a similar demographic. But
What is their model when they tutor?
they've been going into classrooms during the school day,
Okay, right.
and then reading with students. I guess similar actually to what Padres was doing at Harding School.
Yeah, yeah, we had some people doing that, and some meeting kids after school at their homes.
Yeah.
Or library, whatever.
Right.
And pretty well, I'm doing the same thing. I knew of the Ocean Hills model, and just having people contact the schools, mostly McKinley or Harding School, if they were interested in and seeing what they had available for them to do.
What do you guys think about opening up a tutoring day after school, like for instance at our church, just because it's downtown? Would parents even feel comfortable doing that? So actually it was somebody else's idea at our church, but if we had 5 tutors meeting at the same time with 5 kids, you feel like you're doing something with somebody together and everyone feels sort of there's energy in the room. You could do something together with the kids, but then divide up and do their separate tutoring times. But I didn't know if families would feel comfortable bringing their kids to a space they're not familiar with.
I think my experience has been that it is tricky because of the nature of being an immigrant. There's the factor of just really needing for spaces to be trusted spaces because they already feel like they're tiptoeing. And so schools are one of those trusted spaces.
Yeah.
But I mean, that can happen over time though. Those relationships can develop. I just think it takes time. And then the other thing is if it's, what was I about to say? I can't remember what I was about to say.
It'll come back. Thank you.
Well, I think churches are trusted spaces. However, I think with churches, it takes more of trying to start building those relationships first. And then when you get a few people trusting you, then word of mouth gets around, and then others will do that. But to start off with, it would probably be pretty slow until you were able to build more relationships.
Okay. Thanks.
Hey, Landon, can we take the questions off and maybe just put everybody on the screen?
Yes.
There we go. Yeah.
Has anybody been working on actually helping people who could be naturalized to write up their petitions and double checking their petitions before they send them in? I know a few years ago at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Carpentria, we did this maybe 2-3 years ago, 4 years ago, but we needed a lawyer and we didn't have that available after. I think we had a lawyer for 1 or 2 years and then we lost that asset. But I just wondered if anyone else has taken that on, because I heard you talking about teaching the civics and teaching English so they could pass the naturalization test that they have to face.
So that's what Immigrant Hope does. I mean, we are an immigration legal center. We also have Importa here, who does that work. And then I'm not sure, Landon, if the ILDC, they have an accredited rep, but I think they're mostly working with people that are in defense, I mean, in removal proceedings. But the two of us, both Importa and Immigrant Hope, both help people apply for their citizenship. And then Immigrant Hope has the civics program as well.
I'll put the links to both those agencies in the chat window.
Thank you.
No, great question.
How about the rest of you? When you how much do you know about like immigration? Was some of that information, was most of that information new to you? I know, Joyce, you might have heard some of this before, but I'm not sure about the rest of you.
I think for me, the Santa Barbara specific stats were new to me, and that was helpful, especially I think just proportionally thinking about, I knew about the proportion of immigrants in California as opposed to the US, but then thinking about Santa Barbara specifically. And something I'm still curious about too, I'm on an email list of like a labor rights organization and thinking about different ways that like labor abuse and immigration go together. And that's something that I have been like, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm just getting like little pieces of information and I don't have a ton of context for that. And that's something that I'm still interested in learning more about, especially in Santa Barbara and Oxnard and like kind of more farming communities too. So those are still maybe some questions I have. And then aside, like a totally aside comment, just since so many people from our church are here, I was also thinking, I know that Westmont before has sent groups of professors together to the border to do the border experience. And I wonder if that would be something that our church would be interested in throwing out there as something that the church would partner with interested individuals to like kind of cover that cost. Because I think that would be really transformative to have a group of 5 to 10 people from our church go together and have that experience at the border and then be able to bring that back to the church congregation and whatever that stirs up and what kind of steps that might take. I think that'd be a really cool idea.
We actually partner with an organization called Abara Connection, and they're the ones that actually lead the border encounter for us. And so if you guys are interested in doing that as a church, I can definitely get you their information. But I just wanted to address a little bit about the labor issues. So there are definitely some distinct issues out there. One of them, of course, is being pay. And so according to the US Department of Labor, it doesn't matter who you hired. So even if it's an undocumented immigrant, you're not supposed to hire them, right? But if you do hire them, you have to pay them the equivalent of what you're paying anyone else based off of the experience and education that they have. And so if you're hiring the same person for $16, you're not supposed to be paying them, minimum wage or whatever. And so it's supposed to be equal pay. The other thing is that there have been, especially in some of the remote farm areas or agricultural areas, almost trafficking issues with the immigrants, where they are kind of locked up in a way and not able to leave, or they're in a location that doesn't make it easy for them to leave, and their hours that they're forced to work, and with little pay or no pay. And so in some cases, it can even be, it's considered trafficking. The other thing that I think most people don't realize, and that we try to educate the immigrants on is that if they're working, it doesn't matter your status. If you get hurt at work, they are eligible for workman's comp. And so we have a firm here that works with us that we can send people to so that they can help them file for the workman's compensation if they were hurt on the job. I don't know if that helps you any, Phoebe, but.
I'm also curious just about any other, I think a lot of the information I get does come from Oxnard and from closer farming communities. And if there was any sort of like more local information on labor rights specifically and those kind of, because I don't even know how I got some of those emails, and I'd like a little bit more information there.
I think I can probably connect you with a couple of people that might be able to help you along those lines. So we'll get you some information.
Cool, thanks. Also, I have one more question before I forget. You mentioned the accreditation process for people who wanted to, like paralegals kind of. How long is that as a process, and what are some of the qualifications besides the just taking a test?
So to become an accredited rep, you have to go through a immigration law course. You can do it multiple ways. Immigrant Hope actually teaches what's called Immigrant Pathway Institute, which takes you through, it's a 40-hour law course, but they're doing it in, and Landon took it 6 weeks. I think it's a 6-week course. That really is a very broad overview of the immigration process, from the laws for every single type of application to detention and removal, ethics. So it teaches you there's a lot. It's very comprehensive, a lot of information in just a small amount of time. But then the idea is that you would also receive training in individual types of applications that you're going to do. So I'm going to say that the process is probably about 200 hours. We're looking for about 100 hours of training and 100 hours of on-the-job experience, so that you work with a lawyer or an accredited rep and get about 100 hours of experience doing the immigration casework, documenting it, and then putting in an application with the DOJ to become accredited. However, a person can't become accredited unless they are applying with a center that has been recognized by the DOJ as an immigration legal center. So the two have to go together. Okay. And Landon, I don't know if you want to add anything based off of your experience.
No, I mean, it's if anybody on this call is interested in taking the course, at least I highly recommend it. If for no other reason, then you'll be so frustrated at how complicated the process actually is. And I think it gives you empathy for what people are really trying to achieve here. So, but yeah, we have a need for this. There's waiting lists at all of our agencies locally trying to work with this population. So it is.
I like Phoebe's idea about going to the border. We toyed with that idea in our church of taking about 6 of our teenagers to the border, because it's like, if they have that experience, then when they come back here, there's all this excitement, and it can be, game changer for them and the way they see themselves as opposed to others. And not only that, then it motivates them to want to do something. And of course, it truly is their neighbors in many cases,
right,
that are already here and don't have to go to the border to find it or to help. So, and in some cases it might be the kids themselves, but
sure.
We had to cancel it. We had I guess you'd call it a little mission trip last summer, but we canceled it because of the COVID.
Right.
Diane, what are some of the things that are accomplished at that visit? You mentioned staying in apartments and how much it costs, but what actually, when you go, what do you see? What do you do? What's the purpose of going?
So the purpose of going is really just to educate yourself on actually what happens on both sides of the border. And so you do spend a little time at the border itself. And actually you're stuck there anyway, usually trying to come back over. And so you see a lot of different things, but we actually, like I said, we talk with Custom and Border Patrol. And so they give us an idea of what's happening right there. And we actually meet them right there by the river, where river is. And so they just inform you of what's on there. And they're pretty, honestly, they're pretty accurate, and they'll most of those that we meet with really seem to have compassion. And they talk a little bit about how they're often pulled away from the border just because they find people in really bad condition, and they really don't leave them that way. So they'll have to, get a van and get them to a hospital or get them somewhere to take care of them. And they talk about being just under resourced there, but they also talk about what's happening. They're very upfront about what's happening with the drug cartels, and how they'll often put a diversion there so that they can get people in other places across the border. And so it's really a very educational what they share with us. And then we go to a shelter on both sides. So it gives you an idea of what's happening on the other side of the border for those that are turned away at the border that have to find shelter in Mexico. And so we get to hear their stories and what happened. It really depends on what they want to tell us, right? So that's also kind of we go with a bara who already has relationships with them. And have been working with these shelters. So usually they'll have certain people that will tell you their stories that are there. Actually, when we went last year, we actually went to a grocery store, and the shelters were running out of food, and we got to go grocery shopping for them, and then take the food to the shelters. And so it was kind of fun just seeing the kids come up wanting to help us carry the groceries inside. But then coming on the other side of the border, we got to go to a shelter and hear their experience of being in the detention center and what that was like. And then this actually shelter that we were at, they actually helped them connect to the family members. So they plan their travel for them. They have a daycare there for the kids while they're waiting for the travel funds to come through. They have clothing for them. They can go shopping. So it's just really cool. And the first time I went there, we actually got to volunteer there. We were just making the lunches because they'll send them off. Most of them go by bus because it's cheaper and more affordable, and so they'll send them with food. And so it's just really great just being able to just kind of hear from them itself, because you hear a lot of things, but when you experience yourself, it means something completely different. And then we actually spent a couple hours. We just walked up and down in Ciudad Juarez, just up and down and talked to people. So it was just really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. So it's just like kind of the day in the life of lots of people in real time and experience. Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
So and it's 3 days, so it's filled with just different things to do while you're there.
So we are over time right now, so I want to get everybody off so you can go eat dinner at a reasonable hour. I did put a link, if you wouldn't mind filling out this feedback survey for us. We do want to keep offering these and expanding these, and so we'd like to know how, since this is our pilot, we'd like to know how we can improve it. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes to fill that out, that would be great. But just want to say thank you again for being here. Thank you for wanting to engage with this issue. And we'd love to be in touch just about different ways that we can partner together. So thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to end the meeting, so just make sure that you've clicked on the link already.
Oh.
Thanks, everyone.